Ensuring that workplace or employment policies are in place is the board's second area of responsibility. Specifically, the board's goal should be to approve well-written policies that are compliant with the law and minimize risk or exposure to the school. The process for approving employment policies follows the standard policy approval process. The executive director has the primary responsibility for creating and recommending policies that come before the board. Depending upon the size of the organization, the executive director may choose to work collaboratively with staff or committees to develop the recommendations. In some cases, the executive director may utilize board member expertise during the process. The policy put forward should come from the executive director or at the recommendation of the executive director. The board's role in employment policy is to approve policies that are well written, aligned with the established organizational mission, compliant with applicable law, and minimize risk or exposure for the school. It is the executive director's job to disseminate and implement board-approved employment policies with staff. The board should have a policy review cycle established to ensure that policies are monitored or reviewed every 2 to 3 years. This may include review by legal counsel, management, and the staff to determine if updates are needed. The executive director may bring policies forward sooner if it is determined that they are out of compliance with changes in the law or no longer effective in accomplishing their original purpose. Note: it's important in the monitoring stage that the board remember its focus on ensuring alignment with the established organizational mission, compliance with applicable law, and minimizing risk or exposure for the school. It is not their job to administer and enforce policy. While the board does not participate in the employment process, it's important that they ensure there is a policy or process in place to guide administration in this important aspect of running the organization. The employment process should begin prior to actual employment. It starts with ensuring that job descriptions are in place which include qualifications for the position. The policy should include a listing of where jobs will be posted and whether the school will prioritize internal versus external candidates. As applications come in, administration determines who reviews resumes and how candidates will be narrowed down. Interviews follow, where candidates should receive a copy of the job description to sign acknowledging receipt. The executive director has general authority to move forward with the hiring of personnel, as the board has already established a budget and approved policies to guide this process. Remember, board members are only involved in interviewing the executive director position. All others are conducted by administration and staff, unless the executive director invites board participation in hiring select high-level subordinate positions, such as the chief financial officer. Even in this case, the final decision is typically left to the executive director. Once a candidate has been chosen, the executive director moves forward with reference checks and criminal background checks. If all is in order, an offer of employment is given to the candidate. If the school and candidate agree on terms, a written agreement is given. This may be an at-will agreement or a contract depending upon the school's employment policies around types of employment. Remember, a written agreement is required by Minnesota Statute 124D.10 Subdivision 11A when offering employment to a prospective employee. A charter school must give that employee a written description of the terms and conditions of employment and the school's personnel policies. Once employment begins, the board's policies provide guidance for the executive director throughout the person's employment with the school. This begins with ensuring that proper paperwork is completed, followed by a thorough orientation. Note: orientation should include helping the employee to understand charter schools and what makes your charter school unique. The employee needs to know who their supervisor will be and what process will be used to evaluate them, which includes the time frame for evaluations. The evaluation process will include how the school will go about addressing concerns when an investigation is necessary. Termination, which can be initiated by the employee or the school, is an inevitable piece of the employment process, which needs to be considered as the board sets employment policy. As part of membership in the association, MAX often provides resources to assist member schools with their work. One such resource is the MAX Charter School Human Resource Manual titled, The Employment Process, From Recruiting to Hiring, which provides a more detailed description of the employment process. Depending upon the size of your school, the board may want to approve job descriptions as part of workplace policies. Job descriptions define specific roles in the organization and fit within the organizational structures set forth by the board. If they do not choose to approve each job description, at a minimum they should require that one be in place prior to hiring the position and be reviewed regularly with employees as part of the annual employee evaluation process to determine if changes are needed. A sample job description template can be found in the MAX Human Resources Manual. The board should have policies around the evaluation of all employees. This will be addressed in more detail under Area 4, Performance Evaluation. Board policies related to employment often have their foundation in law. While boards are not expected to be experts on all laws pertaining to charter schools, it's a good practice for them to familiarize themselves with where laws are found and how to review them when needed. This is especially the case since Minnesota statutes, Section 124D.10, Subdivision 6 requires charter school board members to provide written agreements to comply with all federal and state laws governing organizational, programmatic, and financial requirements applicable to charter schools as part of the performance contract with their authorizer. Here is the process you would follow to make a determination whether charter schools are required to follow the law regarding discrimination in employment practices. First, it is important to know that Minnesota statutes, Section 124D.10, Subdivision 7 reads, a charter school is exempt from all statutes and rules applicable to a school, school board, or school district unless a statute or rule is made specifically applicable to a charter school or is included in this section. You then need to determine if the law related to discrimination in employment is made specific to charter schools. Minnesota statutes, Section 124D.10, Subdivision 8H reads, a charter school is subject to and must comply with Chapter 363A. Minnesota statutes, Section 363A is the human rights law. Therefore, the law related to discrimination in employment applies to charter schools, and you need a policy to ensure your school's compliance. Following this lesson, you'll find a link to the Office of the Reviser of Statutes for Minnesota, along with some directions on finding the human rights law. Please read the law and use the information to respond to the quiz.